Hello, my name is Natty Cash, and welcome once again to some NFL predictions. Today we have our Week 6 matchups. Here today we have some of our first teams coming off a bye week. We'll see how that factors in. Let's get right into it. Last week I had an 8-14 record, again with some teams on byes. It wasn't a full 16 game schedule, but 8 out of 14 is not too bad. I'm now sitting kind of just at that 500 mark for guesses here. Hopefully, I can improve on that as we go week to week. So, as we look at the AFC, our first matchup is the Indianapolis Colts up against the Tennessee Titans. Titans coming off of a bye, and when I look at byes, usually that's fairly favorable because you have a little bit more time to game plan. For the Titans, I'm almost looking at their roster and saying Mason Rudolph might be the better option at quarterback. Will Levis is then coming back, and by all accounts, seems like he's practicing with the team. So we'll see if that means he's going to be starting this Sunday. But I would actually be more confident in that team if Mason Rudolph was leading it. However, with an extra prep time, that might give Tennessee the edge. The Colts, on the other hand, they're dealing with a lot of injury issues. Of course, Anthony Richardson has been out. We'll see if he plays. Jonathan Taylor's had some injuries, and now more recently, Michael Pittman has had injuries. And so a lot of injuries to that offense. And despite how good Joe Flacco can be and how he was with Cleveland last year, there's still a lot of struggles that are going to happen with that team. I am leaning towards not only this being a division matchup, which I always say is a little bit closer than matchups across other divisions, but having the bye week, I'm giving the edge to the Tennessee Titans. I wouldn't really pick the Titans in most situations, but I think this would be one where they could get another win on the board. Both teams are below 500, so seeing Tennessee get a win here against a division rival, I think this is their opportunity to get another win on the board. Next up, we have the Houston Texans that are 4-1 after a big win against Buffalo last week, up against the Patriots, who are currently sitting 1-4 after their loss to the Dolphins. Again, the momentum seems to be mostly on Houston. The one wild card that comes into this is that it is stated that Drake May is going to be starting for the Patriots this week. They are putting the rookie out there to see what he does. So it'll be interesting to see what he can do in his NFL debut and what he can bring to this Patriots team. I think, when you look at the success of a rookie quarterback coming in, okay, can they manage the ball well, kind of reduce the number of turnovers, kind of work through their progression? But I don't really see them coming or going into this game with a winning mentality. It's more of, this is an opportunity for you to get used to this, the NFL speed and getting used to that process, as we saw with a number of quarterbacks, rookie quarterbacks, where takes a while for them to get used to that process. So I'm excited to see what Drake May can do. But I am going to give the win to the Houston Texans. I think they're just on a roll. 4-1 is pretty solid, even though I kind of doubted them because they were only getting narrow victories. But a big win against the Bills bolsters them, and I think they'll continue to pursue more wins and get another one this weekend. Next up, we have the Pittsburgh Steelers going out to play the Raiders. The Raiders, I think, are in tough because they're dealing with all the issues around Davante Adams. It sounds like Davante Adams isn't even going to play. He wants out. He wants a trade. Kind of seeing what all that is going to happen with on that side. That I think that's a lot of distractions to deal with. Pittsburgh Steelers, despite losing to the Cowboys, are still playing well. Right, that was a close game. And so I do give Pittsburgh the edge here, that until the Raiders start sorting this out, it's going to be hard for them to focus fully on what needs to be done on the field. And so I'm going to give the Steelers the victory on this one. Next, we have an AFC West matchup, which is the LA Chargers versus the Denver Broncos. Chargers coming off of a bye week, but remember their last game, Justin Herbert came out injured, and so still based on reports saying that it's limited in practice, stating that he's feeling better. Don't know really know what percentage of feeling better that looks like. Again, that when you look at media reports, it's always there's a little bit of info that's not really being shared there. So I anticipate Herbert's going to play, but it'll be interesting to see if there's any lingering effects of an injury. Broncos have been doing decently. Another win against the Raiders put them at 3-2, and are actually looking really solid under Bo Nix. And really, there's a drive and competitiveness, right? You see that when that argument between Bo Nix and Sean Payton on play calling. But so I think this is going to be a good matchup. Again, when you look at playing with a bye week, I'm giving the Chargers the edge here. Again, this could certainly change though, and especially if the health of Justin Herbert isn't going to be all there. But I am going to give the edge to the Chargers in this game, that they're going to go in and get a win in Denver. Next, we take a look at an AFC East matchup between the Buffalo Bills and the New York Jets on Monday night. And this is tough to determine here. Buffalo lost against Houston in their last matchup, but then you look at the Jets and they fired their head coach. Now, sometimes when you fire a head coach or you make a big major change, you end up getting a win out of it. And so this is hard to note. Division matchups are always closer than we would anticipate. I would see Buffalo as being the better team overall. So on paper, I would see that. But when you do have a head coach shift and maybe a shift in mentality that happens, oftentimes there's an added bump, and you can't ignore that. And so this is going to be, I think it's going to be a close game. I'll be interested to see kind of defensively how each team prepares against both Josh Allen and Aaron Rodgers. This is tough. I'm going back and forth here, but I think I'm going to lean slightly towards the Jets here. I know that that's probably the underdog here, but I think that new coach bounce, or that bounce that you get when you fire your coach, it has an effect, and I think some home advantage here I think is going to help too. So I do see the Jets getting the victory in this one. Next up, we take a look at some interconference matchups where we have the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Chicago Bears out in London to play an international game here. When I look at these teams, so we have the Jaguars coming off of their first win of the year, beating the Colts, and you have the Chicago Bears also coming off of a win. Just double checking, they beat the where does that see? Oh, beat Carolina, right? And so looking at these two teams, both coming off a win, the trouble is going over to London, I think, neutralizes a lot of things, right? The field is different, so that might throw off certain things that you're wanting to do. That might mean that it's a little bit lower offensively. Who knows? But when I look at both of these teams, if I were to look at which team is better, it's hard to determine, right? Caleb Williams hasn't really been lighting up offensively, and Jacksonville just got their first win. But when you look at the games more closely for Jacksonville, there was only one game, that game against the Bills, where they lost by a lot. Most of the other games where they were in, and if they had the gumption to be able to get over the line in some of those games, right, they could be having a very different conversation. So in this game, and maybe giving them an added bonus because they are used to doing these London games, where then maybe not as much from the Bears roster, I'm going to give the Jaguars the victory here. 2 wins in a row for them, and winning against the Chicago Bears. Our next matchup is the Washington Commanders going to play Baltimore. Maybe a bit of a a Maryland matchup here, a local rivalry. This is an interesting one because Commanders are doing very well this year, right? I think 4-1 so far, very solid start. Jaden Daniels seems to be the real thing and a good quality quarterback. But I think this is their toughest matchup now, going into Baltimore to try to get a win. Looking at this, a lot of their wins have been good wins, but maybe not as to the highest caliber of teams, beating the Giants, beating the Bengals, who have been struggling. Where then the Ravens have had actually a pretty darn tough schedule, right? They've already played the Chiefs, the Cowboys, the Bills, a divisional matchup against the Bengals, and the Raiders was probably the easiest one, although in that mix of a really tough schedule, having the Raiders there is always tough. So I'm going to give the edge to Baltimore, that I do think they're the better team here. Getting that tough win against Cincinnati, I think, is really important to kickstart their season and know that they can go out and finish a game when it's tight. So I am going to give the edge to Baltimore. Although if Jaden Daniels can come in and make this a good game or even get the win, like, we have to really take this Commanders team seriously for the rest of the year, that they could be a playoff team for sure, and kind of see where they go from there. If they lose here, they still are having a great season. Can then follow them along as we go throughout the year. But I am giving the Ravens a win in this matchup. Then we have the Cleveland Browns going out to Philadelphia to face the Eagles. I don't really know what to say about the Browns. The one clip, if you haven't seen it, where then the coach for the Browns, Stefanski, is trying to go on, or Stefanski, sorry. Stefanski's trying to go for it on fourth down, and just Deshaun Watson just walks off the field. Like, that is, like, the Browns are just in a horrible situation with Deshaun Watson, and I have no idea how that's going to resolve. This is, again, could be, and as people are saying online, one of the worst contracts in sports history, not just NFL history. So I'm not sure what's going to happen there, but it's that type of mentality that thinks, like, what makes you think you're going to come into a game and be able to have an impact or feel like you're going to motivate your team to a win, right? If the coach and quarterback are not on the same page and your quarterback's giving up on your offense, like, that's not a good look at all. And then on top of that, the Eagles are coming off of a bye, which usually coming off of a bye gives you an added edge. So this could be a very gross one, having the Eagles win and could be winning by multiple touchdowns. It's hard for me to pick the Browns at all until I see some sort of change or character that's going to happen out of that team. And I don't know if we're going to see it this year, and it's going to be an issue they're going to deal with for a while. So I'm going to give the Eagles the win in this one. Next, we have the Cincinnati Bengals up against the New York Giants. Bengals, when you look at this game, if they want any hope of some form of playoff aspiration, this has to be a must-win for them. They played well against Baltimore, losing in overtime eventually, but you have to look at teams like this and say, if you want to progress forward and try to push for a playoff position, this has to be a win. I don't think that Cincinnati can go in at 1-5 if they lose this game and think that they're going to push their way to a playoff in any realistic sense. So the Bengals need to come in here and get a win. But that's not necessarily that easy. The Giants have done decently well. Like, they won against the Seahawks last week. They kept the Cowboys close, won against the Browns, kept the Commanders close. So when you look at some of those games, they're not getting blown out. Like, it's not going to be anything to roll over for. And a big part of that is probably the play of Malik Neighbors and his connection with Daniel Jones. The problem is that if he's still suffering from concussion issues, and last report I saw that he's still at a day-to-day basis, that makes it difficult for me to think that the Giants are going to do much offensively. So with that said, and some of the uncertainty with Malik Neighbors, I am giving the Bengals the win here, and hopefully that helps the Bengals kind of jumpstart their season and get into an opportunity to push for playoffs. Next, we look at some of our NFC matchups, and the first one we see here is NFC West matchup. On Thursday night, we have the 49ers playing the Seahawks at home. And this one is an interesting one. You know, maybe a few weeks ago I would have said 49ers go in and take control of this game. The problem is that the uncertainty around Christian McCaffrey makes it feel like they're not as confident in these positions as and haven't really taken control of games. You know, they lost to the Cardinals at home last week, lost to the Rams. Like, they haven't been doing well within their own division. And so it's hard to see, you know, what is this team supposed to look like? And is this part of the Super Bowl slump that you sometimes get for the team that loses the Super Bowl? Maybe this is what we're seeing here, and not seeing the same gumption as we did last year. The Seahawks, again, decent start, but as I said before, they hadn't played anyone of note to get to where they were, and so when they've now lost their last two games, they're kind of in a slide themselves, and finding a way to right the ship and make sure that they can keep progressing forward. So this is a really tough one to pick here. You know, I would maybe give Seattle an edge because of their home. Their home stadium is usually pretty loud, and usually traveling out west is tough, but you're not traveling that much when it's in a division matchup. So this one I'm really unsure about of where I'm going to go. I'm going to go with the 49ers here, that they're going to start figuring things out. If they don't and they start losing, that this will be 0-3 record for the 49ers within their own division. That's going to be hard to pull their way out of that. They're going to have to get wins and make sure that they can do well enough in their division that they don't have to go to a tiebreaker, because, you know, if they're going to lose to each one of their opponents, it's going to be tough to win the division again this year. So I am giving the 49ers the win here, although it's going to be tight. I think it might be within a field goal between these two teams. Next up, we have the Arizona Cardinals going out to Lambeau Field to face off against the Green Bay Packers. And the Cardinals have been doing pretty decent this year. Even though their record is 2-3, let's take, again, looking at their schedule, they've lost to the Lions, the Commanders, and the Bills. And the Commanders have been doing well. Lions are a solid team. We're in the playoffs last year, so were the Bills. So it's not like they're losing against bad teams, or they're struggling to get wins on the board. Like beating San Francisco away from home last week is a big win. So they're coming into this, I think, still with a sense of confidence. And Green Bay is kind of in that same situation where then, you know, they're doing well, right? And now with Jordan Love kind of back into the mix, I think for them, you know, they can really get on a roll. But even like beating the Rams last week wasn't by a lot. So I do see this as being a close game. I would not be surprised if Arizona can come in here and make an upset. But I do see Green Bay as one of the top teams in the NFC. And I do think they can go out and get a win here. So I am giving Green Bay the win on this one. It's going to be... You know, it's going to be a close one, but I do see the Packers coming away with the victory here. Then we look at an NFC matchup where we have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers coming in, facing off against the New Orleans Saints. Buccaneers had a really good game last Thursday where they just lost in overtime to the Falcons, a tough NFC South matchup, and they've got another one here. Although it may be a little bit less tough because Derek Carr is out, and New Orleans Saints have announced Spencer Rattler to be the starting quarterback. We'll see what he can do. It's an unknown quality, but it's going to be tough as an NFL debut to come in and take on the defending NFC South champions. So, for me, I think the Bucs have to be favored here and have to be going in thinking that they get a win here. Also, having a little bit of that mini bye when they played on Thursday maybe gives them a little extra rest, gives them an opportunity to come into New Orleans, get a solid divisional win, and continue to build on a decent season so far. So I am going to pick the Buccaneers here. If Derek Carr was in there, it would be really interesting to see how this matchup would unfold, but I am going to give the win to the Buccaneers. Next, we look at the Detroit Lions coming off of a bye week, going into Dallas to see if they can get a win. Two playoff teams from last year facing off against each other, and Detroit having the bye week certainly gives them the advantage. The Cowboys had a decent win against the Steelers, although when you look at some of their wins, like against the Steelers and the Giants, it hasn't really been fully convincing. And even their biggest win against the Browns, we now know all the chaos that's happening in Cleveland. So they really haven't had, a good solid win. Losing to the Ravens, even though that was a close game, was, decent enough. But I think there's still some things missing within this Cowboys team for them to really propel themselves and be in a good playoff position or in a good rhythm to then be pushing in the playoffs a little bit more than they have been in the past. Where then Detroit, I think, has been relatively solid, right? A 3-1 record so far. That's only really being overshadowed by the Vikings at this point. And so I think that they can continue. Having that extra week goes a long way to preparing properly. And so I do see the Detroit Lions going into Dallas and getting a win against the Cowboys. And finally, our last game to predict is the Atlanta Falcons going into Carolina for another NFC South matchup. When I look at Carolina, there's still a lot that needs to be done there. I think that your bright spot, you have Chuba Hubbard getting some good rushing yards out there. Andy Dalton, he had that one game as a nice little bump, but I think generally overall there's going to be struggles to be had, as he had struggles against the Bears defense. And for Atlanta, I think we now saw the first full-blown kind of Kirk Cousins appearance. Like, this is what we can get from Kirk Cousins. A big 500-yard game, I think, is really going to bolster the Falcons to continue forward, especially getting a tough win against the Bucs last Thursday. Even having that little mini bye for them, playing Thursday last week, I don't even think that would really matter too much. I am saying the Falcons are going to go in and take care of the Carolina Panthers here and continue to push towards their quest to win a division title, get in the playoffs, and kind of go from there. So I have the Atlanta Falcons winning this one. So just a final quick wrap up here. Here are all of my predictions for the upcoming week. If you have your own predictions, you're welcome to put them down into the comments below. Please like and subscribe, as I would appreciate that, as that helps to grow the channel. We'll see you next week. Goodbye for now.